We are live on the New York Mets post-game show. First one of the season. The Mets were in action today on February 23rd. Split squad action, both against the Marlins and the Nationals. This feels so good to be back on this screen with these post-game streams. Rob, how you doing? What's up to all Mets fans here with us on this lovely Sunday afternoon as well?
Yep, the first post game, the first split squad game of spring, and a lot of players we had to watch. Two different type of games, one in Port St. Lucie, the other one in West Palm. So it was a lot of fun. Let's get to it, man. I'm ready to talk about some Mets baseball.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. We're going to be talking about the action between the Mets and Nationals, the Mets and Marlins, and also at the end of that, we'll be recapping some of the things that we saw yesterday in the Mets versus Astros first game in spring training, talking about Clay Holmes and Juan Soto. Before we fully get into this post game, please, as always, smash the thumbs up buttons on both streams. This is going to be happening all season long, ladies and gentlemen. It'll probably be a little bit of a different background as we get our new background for the post games, and you'll see a lot of a cooler, more cool setup that Rob is putting together. But smash the thumbs up button. If you haven't subscribed to either of our channels, make sure to subscribe. Okay, let's start off with the Nationals game here because I think that both of us had some difficulties in terms of actually streaming this game. I don't get Nationals broadcast where I'm at, unfortunately. So I was left scoreboard watching, essentially, and box score watching on the MLB app. You see Tyrone Taylor, Francisco Alvarez, and Jesse Winker getting these starts. And also you had some of the younger, more exciting prospects in Ryan Clifford and Jet Williams. I'll throw Luke Ritter into there as well, but they all took the overs. Listen, what I wanted to talk about here is clearly Jesse Winker getting off to a great start, 1-for-1, I believe, with a walk and a double. But Nick Madrigal actually injured himself on a little bit of a comebacker right behind the mound. He was charging the baseball, actually fell as he was throwing to first base. Nick Madrigal, this is a guy that the Mets brought in, and a lot of Mets fans have been labeling him the 2.0 version of Jose Iglesias and that type of utility man signing, or at least he could live up potentially to those expectations. What do you make of what you saw in this game and also the Nick Madrigal injury now, Rob?
Yeah, you don't want to see anybody get hurt. Look, second spring training game of the season, first for him, and he was trying hard, right? He's borderline on the verge of making a team as a utility infielder. He was learning to play shortstop, and it's unfortunate because it could lead right to the Jose Iglesias just falling in the lap of the New York Mets just because of this injury, and you're going to start hearing a lot about it now. And this might be, put a lot of smiles on Met fans' faces. But again, this is a guy that David Stearns brought in because he is a super utility guy. The interesting thing is that I didn't even know Madrigal never played shortstop before. He played everywhere else in the infield except for shortstop. He was learning the position in spring. So, it's unfortunate because David Stearns likes the overall player, most likely defensively, but knowing that he never played shortstop is a little bit of a weird situation considering the fact that the Mets don't have a shortstop besides Lindor on the roster, unless you put Acuna as a part of that possibility as well. Maybe Acuna will be that replacement now, but we'll see. But it's unfortunate. You like Madrigal, working hard and giving him his all. Like he hit the pitcher. He tried to hustle in for it to try to throw it out at first, and he just landed wrong and a dislocated shoulder, and it's going to knock him out for probably a couple of months, probably. But it's unfortunate.
Yeah.
It might leave us up. Jose Iglesias might be coming around the corner soon.
Yeah, and it is really unfortunate as well. You never want to see that, especially from a guy that was really going to be fighting for a roster spot in that utility type of role. He is kind of a defensive wizard, and that's why the Mets brought him in. And David Stearns loves these types of players that can just play great up the middle, second base, and now trying out that position at shortstop, like you just said. So it is a dislocated shoulder for Nick Madrigal. He didn't even get a chance to go up to the plate at bat. I believe he had no at bats. Before he went down with the injury, and it's just unfortunate timing again. Like any injury is unfortunate timing whenever it happens, but especially a new organization for him, a new team, new environment, first game going down, and not even a single at bat for Nick Madrigal. So again, that's something to watch out for in terms of Jose Iglesias still being out there, being available. We saw that sit down interview that he did with John Heyman. He's got multiple MLB offers out there on the table for him already, and there's no shock, right, in that aspect. He's coming off of a career year and really was the Kickstarter of last season, Jose Iglesias was. So he's clearly holding out hope with him not signing any contract with any other team. He's hoping for that return. We will see if this Nick Madrigal injury, changes the mind of David Stearns in terms of their interest, or they still continue to go the internal route with a guy like Luis Angel Acuna, who we'll talk about here also in just a second, as he was in the other game. But it's a 6-11 loss against the Washington Nationals. Again, the scores are what they are. We're going to be talking about a tie game as well. That's just the nature of spring training. We're not really so much focused on the end result in terms of the score here. We're talking about the processes of these players and what we're seeing, especially from the mainstay guys, but some of the guys that are also just trying to make a name for themselves in this organization as well. Your Jet Williamses, your Ryan Cliffords, even your Simon Wands, who came in the last inning. He had himself a hell of a game and sent a 3-run home run over the fence on a, just hanging curveball or whatever type of off-speed pitch the opposing pitcher was throwing. He came into this organization, Simon Wan, if you all don't know, as a 16-year-old international free agent signing back in 2022. He's only 19 years old as well, and that is a just grand way to open up some eyes, especially in the last inning of a laugher type of game. And, maybe some people are paying attention. Some people maybe have already turned the game off, but that is a great thing to see from a 19-year-old prospect in this farm system in Simon Wan. So I wanted to make sure that we talked about that. But I wanted to also talk about, because we haven't talked about this enough. We've been talking about center field. This has been a position ever since Brandon Nimmo was trying to hit the open market before he inevitably came back to the New York Mets. The Mets were on the cusp of losing Nimmo to free agency after such a great season, and the Mets kind of at face value overpaid, and rightfully so, in terms of bringing him back. Now they made the trade for Tyrone Taylor last season, who was a fantastic fill-in down the stretch of the season, especially for Harrison Bader when his bat went quiet. And now this offseason, we had a trade for Mr. Jose Siri, who we'll also talk about here in just a second in the next game. What is this dynamic? What do you envision, Rob, throughout the course of 162? Because Gary on the broadcast, in which I was hearing when Jose Siri's up at bat, because I was watching the Miami Marlins versus Mets game this afternoon, he was saying that the plan tentatively is splitting time almost 50-50 between Tyrone Taylor and Jose Siri. And you can't even play matchups at that point because they're both right-handed hitters. So what do you envision that, tandem and that dynamic looking like in center field?
Yeah, when it comes to Jose Siri, I think Jose Siri has the job. I think the Mets are hoping for some type of, I guess I would say a little bit a dynamic with the bat, a little bit, right? We know he doesn't hit for average; he strikes out a lot, but you can see the talent in the bat. He hit. We talked about this. He's a 20 home run guy. It's just that he doesn't bring nothing else except for speed on the base paths and power, and obviously his tremendous defense. They brought him in here because Juan Soto is in right field and Brandon Nimmo is in left field. Two guys that, especially Nimmo, haven't been with health, and who knows how well he's going to be defensively with the health of the foot. And the same thing with with Juan Soto. We know he's not the greatest defensive player, so they brought in Jose Siri, I think, because they see the potential in the power there, and when he's going to be in the bottom third of the order, you want to see somebody that can just have a ball jump off the bat, and maybe you could steal a run or two. And it is interesting that I don't know if Gary Cohen is that his opinion, or did he hear that? Did he talk to people? Because having a 50-50 split, I mean, what is that? How does that work when it's based on matchups? Like, I could see if one of them were a lefty and you'd be like, okay, that kind of makes sense. But is it because of what Tyrone Taylor did last year? He was basically a backup outfielder and ended up being the starting outfielder basically for the last couple of months of the season. I mean, go with the hot hand. I mean, who's ever playing well, right? I mean, I think Siri's better defensively than Tyrone Taylor. I think Siri's a little bit above that I guess elite, a little bit better than I think Siri's the elite defender. Tyrone Taylor is just below that, but I mean, you can't go wrong with Tyrone Taylor if they go that route. But I just played a hot hand, to be quite honest. Tyrone Taylor doesn't have the power like Jose Siri could potentially have, but we've seen what Tyrone Taylor could do in big spots. He was, one of our clutch players going down the stretch last year. And that's something you just don't know what you're going to get from Siri. You're not going to get average. You're not going to get, a smart at bat, so to speak, with Siri. I think the Mets are just hoping for just him connecting with power. But if they are going to do a platoon, I think just go with the hot hand on that day.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. I mean, Jose Siri definitely has that ceiling in terms of the home run power. But again, coming off of a season where he hit, 18 home runs or 20 home runs plus, right? So I think 22 home runs, actually. I'm throwing out all sorts of numbers here. It doesn't really matter. Like, he's a 20 plus home run candidate. We know the defensive capabilities that he has, but a 620 OPS and 187 batting average doesn't really inspire that much confidence in terms of consistent at bats. And when Gary, Cohen said this on the broadcast, the tone of his voice made me think that it was an opinion piece from him, rather than some information that he was going off of. But again, right? I mean, you have the plus side with Jose Siri. Both guys are capable defenders in the outfield. We know that already with Tyrone Taylor. Riding the hot hand actually would make sense here because, again, with Tyrone Taylor, what really is his ceiling as well with the bat? He's not going to wow you, right? He has the ability to get on base probably at a very higher clip than Jose Siri, but he's not going to be hitting home runs or doubles galore for you. So that's something to keep an eye out on because, again, both plus defenders, which is exactly what you need in center field, but who is giving you the more consistent at-bats and getting on base for you towards the bottom of the lineup consistently to try to flip the lineup over. That is something that I'm going to definitely be monitoring early on this season in terms of what Carlos Mendoza decides the split situation will be between those two ball players. D is joining the chat here saying, let's talk Madrigal. We just did again. If you just joined, that is completely okay. First post game of the season. I am hyped right now. Again, we did all the post games last season as our schedule allowed. We'll be doing this all 2025 long as well. So if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to subscribe to the channel. You will get all your information, post-game breakdowns, analysis, etc. But yeah, listen, Jose Iglesias is definitely on the table at this point. I honestly thought that Jose Iglesias would have been on the table even with Nick Madrigal in this organization. Nick Madrigal, with all due respect to him, as good as, defense that he brings to the table, he just simply, former first-round pick himself, has not been able to figure it out with the bat at the major league level with both clubs in Chicago. And again, it just seemed like maybe a shot in the dark. Maybe he could impress, but in spring training. But at this point, I mean, you hate to say this, but do you think he's at this point a DFA candidate after that injury, or do you think that he's going to be sticking around in the organization? Because it's a viable question at this point, given his timetable. They're going to be looking for ligament damage, etc., with the MRI. If that comes back clean, of course, a dislocated shoulder, I'm not sure what the timetable for that is, but, if there's any sort of structural damage in terms of that MRI result that he's going to get, that could keep him on the shelf for a while. And at that point, we're talking about roster spots, et cetera. And I think he's on a minor league deal, right? Or it was a split contract for Nick Madrigal. So, there you go. What do you think?
Well, the thing is, it's like, even if it is like a month, right? It's nothing, anything that has to be repaired or surgery, just say it's just pure rest for 25, a month, for the month of April. That's about 25 games right there. And this is a guy that, is probably brought here for his defense capabilities, not his bat. And he doesn't play shortstop. They're trying to put him at shortstop as well. So I just see it as, if he wants to stay in the minors just to rehab and everything like that, your best bet is probably to keep him in the minors through rehab, and he ain't gonna, force his way out. Who's gonna pick him up when he's injured? So,
Right.
go to the rehab, and I still don't believe this is gonna lead to Acuna being the headline here of the possibility. Oh, that's gonna be a magical replacement. I still don't see that because, again, when it comes to magical, he's gonna play once or twice a week. Couple of defensive replacements. They want a ton of at bats for Acuna, and I still think Jeff Neal is going to be the second baseman. So I still think it's going to lead to Iglesias. I think the Mets are going to end up having no choice. I don't think it's their number one option at this point. And maybe Iglesias would have came back eventually anyway if they seen, Magicals might have been not performing well at shortstop when he was trying that out. We know what Acuna can do, but I still feel like it's just going to lead to Jose Iglesias at this point. And again, for a couple of $1 million, again, if he was looking for $5 to $8 million and you were only willing to give 5 or 6, I mean, just give the next couple of $1 million. Jose Iglesias can play shortstop in a pinch. He can play second. He can play third. We know what he brings with vibes to the team and just the culture of the team. Just bring him back. I think it's worth a couple of $1 million that the Mets probably are not wanting to give him. I think it's worth it at this point. Magical is not going to be Jose Iglesias of last year. He's just not. I'm not saying Jose Iglesias is going to do what he did last year, but I do know what he can do, and he brings a utility option for Mendoza at all three positions in second base, shortstop, and third base that this team actually needs. And it makes more sense because Jose Iglesias can come off the bench. He did it last year. Before he became the second base starter, he was off the bench. Like, that was his role. I don't know if they throw Acuna out there once or twice a week, is that going to benefit him or actually hurt him? I don't want to play that game. I want to have that guy on the bench that I know when called upon, he'll step up at any moment. That's where I think Jose Iglesias is going to fit in well.
So I'm trying to relate this situation back to the Jose Quintana situation because there were multiple reports actually over the past couple of days. We've been talking about the Jose Quintana situation respectively on both of our channels, right? Heyman and DeComo came out and basically said that the Mets have thought about Jose Quintana, but that they're ultimately at this point not interested in Jose Quintana. I'm not sure if you saw that, but that's something that came across my feed from both DeComo and Heyman. That's a veteran option that makes sense, and we both talked about how much he makes sense for this rotation now that Frankie Montas is on the shelf for however long he is, right? Now the same situation kind of applies here for this utility role. And do you think that the Mets, in terms of available free agents, still are really not trying to add any more money onto the books? Do you think that that's a factor here, right? Because with Quintana, you can say, okay, he's probably worth what Andrew Heaney just signed with the Pirates for about $5 million, I believe, on a one-year deal. Quintana had a better 2024 campaign than him, so let's give him a couple $1 million raise over that. You can compare the two contracts. Let's give Quintana, $7 to $8 million. You pay the surcharge penalty, that's approaching 15, 16, $17 million with the 110% tax, whatever it may be. I don't have the calculations in front of me, so don't quote me. I'm just, trying to, I guess, I don't know. This is a synopsis of the situation, right? But do you think that the same, I guess, process applies now to the Jose Iglesias conversation? Because we're talking about the same ballpark in terms of the money range, right? I mean, hey, Jose Iglesias is going to be like $5, $6, $7 million. He could even be potentially more expensive because we know who his agent is in Scott Boras. So do you think that the Mets would just rather go the internal route, like they've already stated with the pitching side of things, in a Luisangel Acuna? Or this is where I think that this next guy that I've been talking about on my channel, when we flip over to the Mets and Marlins game, has the advantage because he's a lefty. Do you think that they're not going to have a backup shortstop on the roster, bank on Francisco Lindor's extended health, right? Because he has been relatively healthy for the entirety of his Mets career so far, and just give Brett Baty that opening day roster shot, who is now 3 for 5 in spring training so far in 2 games. I know it's a little bit premature. 2 for 3 today with the double. He smoked that double. Do you think that they would prioritize just not having that utility man, having Luisangel Acuna be the emergency utility man and a call-up from Syracuse, and just giving that position to Brett Baty?
I mean, they seem like they're shoving Brett Baty down our throat, so that's a strong possibility. Like you said, it's similar money on either guy you go after, Quintana or Iglesias. Maybe $1 million here or there. It doesn't matter what do they value. Do they value their pitching lab and not concerned about the starting pitcher, regardless of who's going to replace go in that spot for Frankie Montas, and they think the pitching lab is going to take care of that situation on its own, and they're more worried about the utility situation. Because here's the issue: we don't know how quote unquote healthy that back is for Francisco Lindor. We don't know if he might need, a day off every week or, twice a week, trying to keep him healthy, because that back is still going to be an issue. It's still been brought up to Mendoza as well. They kind of been, pushing it to the back burner, have been like poo-pooing it a little bit. But it's a concern if everybody starts talking about it around them. I think they're going to be very careful early on with Francisco Lindor. Like, there's situations where he's probably going to be out of games and probably not start in a week, and everybody's going to wonder why. They're protecting that back. You can't, I'm sorry, throwing Brett Beatty to start at shortstop is not going to make me feel good about the middle infield if Brett Beatty is playing. Even if Brett Beatty is somewhat serviceable, he's not a shortstop, right? He's barely a third baseman. He's trying second base. He lost his job once, twice, a couple of times already. He's on the fringe of not even being a prospect anymore. I could see them going the internal route more in the start and pitching because of the depth they have. And you saw Max Kranick, what he did today. He's definitely a potential possibility if one of those guys like McGill or Cannon or even Blackburn don't really, we don't know if Blackburn's going to be officially ready for, for that the first week or two of the season, maybe even the first month. It looks like he will be, but, can Max Kranick be one of those options? I think internally the starting pitching just makes more sense internally. I wouldn't do that, but I think David Stearns feels like he has that depth. But we're already, it's what, second day of the spring training games, and we already have, we're already reaching into our depth, and we haven't even started a game during the season yet. So I think they would go externally in the utility market and go internally with the starting pitching.
Well, let's hope that Andy Martino is incorrect then, because he just tweeted out about this Nick Madrigal situation and saying, expect the Mets to go internal to try to replace Nick Madrigal. So that's what Martino says. And again, I can see it. Like, I think the most logical sense at this point, if you're over that threshold anyways, is that if you need the pieces, just go and get them, right? And Cohen has shown a willingness to do that for certain guys of a higher caliber, right? Maybe not so much the, stopgap options that maybe a Quintana would be, or maybe a Jose Iglesias would be. Iglesias more so or more less of a stopgap option than Jose Quintana. But again, I can see, even though I don't agree with it, just like you said, just because we don't agree with it, I can see at least the Mets not wanting to do that, right? Because at the end of the day, we're not happy with the depth options and the secondary options for either the starting rotation or the utility. Actually, I am. I'm happy with Luis Angel Acuna. I think we've disagreed on that in the past in terms of the reps that he's going to need, but I've always stated that he's going to be on this roster come opening day, and this kind of just makes that argument a little bit stronger from my point of view. But especially in the rotation for me, that's where I can 100% agree with you, right? Not comfortable with those backup options. I think Paul Blackburn's going to be in this rotation. I think he's going to be healthy if I had to imagine, but you're still going to need to rely on Tyler McGill or Griffin Canning, and I simply don't want to do that. So that's where I think Jose Iglesias makes the most sense, or Jose Quintana makes the most sense, but I would probably have to guess at this point that Martino could be correct in that the Mets are just not going to budge on Jose Iglesias, no matter how much he wants to come back. I would love to see it happen, right? I'd love to rehash this whole OMG thing. I get it, right? But you could probably expect some regressions from Jose Iglesias. He's going to be playing less games as well, so that's going to be natural, right? We're not going to expect him to post a 330 batting average, etc., and whatever he posted last season. But I don't know. It's really about the asking price to me, because I think his market is what it is, given his age, given the regressions and the lesser of a role that he's going to play. But at the end of the day, he did hire Scott Boras after all, right? So I don't know. I agree. It does seem like the Mets are trying to force feed Brett Beatty back into the equation. And I've always kind of assumed that that would be the case because how else are you going to build his trade value up? If Brett Beatty stuck into this organization and stuck with this organization for this entire offseason, I just knew that they were going to give him every opportunity to make his case for why he should make the open day roster. And I feel like we're just heading down that route.
Yeah, I mean, I already have my concerns with the rotation. Even healthy, I have my concerns. I never liked the depth that the so-called depth that we're talking about, right? The depth is not good. I'm sorry, Griffin Cannon is not good. Tyler McGill is not good. Max Kranick, was hurt last year. Who knows what he's going to be this year? That's your other depth. I don't feel comfortable with that. Jose Quintana had an under 4 ERA last year, one of our best pitchers down the stretch. We already know what Jose Iglesias did to this team, right? I'm not gonna, live or die on the internal options. And again, David Stearns wants to do that. That's fine. But here's the problem, and this is always the issue that I continue to have. When you have options that are better than what you currently have, you go after that, because even if the options, let's say Jose Quintana just doesn't look the same anymore, Jose Iglesias just lost a step or two, and he doesn't look like Jose Iglesias of last year, then you can go to your internal options, because you already exhausted that option already. And then he's like, all right, let's give Brett Beatty the opportunity here. But here's the problem. If you give it to Brett Beatty, if you give it to a Max Kranick or a Blackburn, or let's say McGill, Cannon, and Kranick, and you give them put in that rotation as well, and they fail, you're going even further into your depth for probably guys that are just as bad of the guys you're trying to replace. When you have the opportunity of bringing in veterans here that have been there, done that, you're not looking for these guys. Like, I don't know what they're expecting from these guys. Like, are we expecting Beatty to be a superstar here? Because force feeding him and giving him every opportunity to be a super utility guy. Beatty couldn't hit a ball off the ground when he started every day. He's going to play once or twice a week, maybe 3 times if he's lucky, and not really seeing pitching every single day. How's that going to help a guy that's trying to, save his career basically in a Mets uniform? And the same thing that goes for, any one of these guys in the rotation. Doesn't make sense. Like, I like Max Kranick. Like, when we got him last year, I was like, that's a good pickup. He could have been one of the late rotation options, but he got hurt. I think he could be a possibility, right? I don't think Griffin Cannon. I think I just don't like him. McGill is what McGill is. You're going to see what McGill is once again. The fact of the matter is, there was options out there, or there is options out there that are clearly better. Right? I think we're playing with this internal option nonsense. But if Jose Quintana goes elsewhere, Jose Iglesias goes elsewhere, you have nowhere else to go except even more internal if things don't work out with, let's say Max Kranick and Brett Beatty. Where are you going to go now? You're going to say, okay, Acuna, now it's your turn again. So, we all might like that aspect of it. But again, I still don't like the fact that you have one of your top prospects as a bench role. Acuna is going to be your super utility guy, and this is a guy that you want to get a ton of at-bats. This is a guy that we all know wasn't doing well in AAA when he was called up. I know he showed a lot when he came up for that around month or so last year, but he was struggling in AAA, and it didn't look good with the bat. So we're just going to throw these guys out there and say, okay, great, but I don't like not giving these guys starting roles and giving them less at bats, because I think you're stopping their growth a little bit, especially Acuna, because I think Acuna can be a very good player. But playing him 3 times a week, maybe even twice a week, I just don't see the logic in that at all. And they're going to end up forcing themselves with internal options and hope for the best. Because if it doesn't work out, where are you going to go outside? You can't wait to the trade deadline because you're going to lose a lot of games. And that's an issue. And it could cause you to lose games. And that's what I don't like going into the season.
Yeah, so I think that when we were talking about this team with no injuries, completely fully healthy, I didn't mind a guy like Griffin Canning cracking the roster, right? being a long reliever as his role, right? Giving the Mets some innings when they need it in a blowout game, either way, whether they're losing or winning. But now, if we're talking about him in serious consideration for a major role, taking up one of those rotation spots, that's where my issue comes in, right? So again, I don't have any issues with a guy like Kranick or Griffin Canning in certain roles, but they have to be limited options, limited roles, because those are the types of guys that they have shown to be so far in their careers, especially a guy like Griffin Canning, especially him, right? I don't want to put that, floor ceiling on Max Kranick just yet, but Griffin Canning for sure. I'm comfortable in labeling him that. Um, but yeah, and now we're talking about Griffin Canning potentially taking a much larger role. I think Tyler McGill is clearly in the driver's seat when it comes to the competition between those two guys in light of Frankie Montas and that injury. But no, I agree completely with you on the Jose Quintana front. I've talked about it. It makes perfect sense. But everything that we're hearing, especially from the reliable reporters, we're not even talking about Andy Martino at this point. We're talking about, Heyman at the very minimum, who has those connections to, Scott Boras, we know, with, Iglesias being obviously the Boras client, not Quintana, but and DeComo, who's a Mets beat reporter as well. So I don't know how this is going to play out. 3.75 ERA. I know that the efficiency, Rob, we both talked about the efficiency in terms of runners in scoring position, maybe longer counts, maybe some starts that he only is able to go 4 2/3 or 5 innings. But those are valuable innings at that point. And those are competent innings, I should say. Those are competent innings. And if we're trying to rely on those 4 2/3 or 5 innings being competent out of Griffin Canning, I mean, you could roll the dice on it, and maybe you get lucky more often than not if you're David Stearns. But it really is a roll of the dice or a poker game, like you just alluded to a couple minutes ago. So we'll see what the Mets do in terms of internal versus external options as it comes to utility players in light of the Madrigal injury and also the Montas injury with Jose Quintana and Andrew Heaney now being off the board. Jose Quintana is that likeliest of option if they change their mind. But how about Sandy Alcantara? Let's just talk about him making the start up to 99 miles per hour with his fastball. He has been out for a long time with that arm surgery that he got, Tommy John, I believe it was, that he got that sidelined him for going on a season and a half, right? I mean, it was definitely a little bit over a season. He looked electric out there. Now, I will say, the first 2 at-bats from both Luis Angel Acuna and Mark Vientos, when you're facing a guy, like, Alcantara, it's pretty hard, right? That's a tough task. Clearly, the Marlins have their own situation going on with trying to get him ramped up and Sandy Alcantara and maybe exploring a trade for him, whether it's midseason or in the offseason, because he's only got 2 years of control left on his contract. Alcantara does. But Luis Angel Acuna and Mark Vientos both trying to go the opposite way. First baseman for the Marlins made a great play in Luis Angel Acuna in his first at-bat to rob him of either a single or a double, depending on how much he was hustling out of the box. And Mark Vientos, a nice little single opposite field versus, again, a guy of the caliber of Sandy Alcantara. What did you make of that if you were able to watch any of those pitches in that first inning?
Yeah, he looked electric. Getting that ball up to 99, looking like old Sandy Alcantara. The good, he's clearly going to be a trade option. If not, sometime during spring training. I mean, they already named him the opening day starter. So, I mean, that doesn't mean anything. They can still trade him before the opening day. I doubt they're going to do that. I think they're going to, they're probably not going to get the value now because nobody knows if he can stay healthy at this point. But if he has a couple of months, like April and May, maybe even June, like say about 10 to 12 starts where he looks good and he looks healthy, he's going to be on the trade target. But you know what? I'm going to, stop the brakes on everybody here. David Stearns, I don't trust him trading prospects. I'm sorry. He's shoving them all down our throats now. You really think he's going to give up prospects for these guys? I'm sorry. It's we can talk about Sandy Alcantara. We can talk about Luis Castillo, Dylan Cease, Michael King. We can talk about it till the cows come home. You had a chance to get Garrett Crochet. You didn't want to do what you needed to do to get him, right? Garrett Crochet looked damn good in spring training today, didn't he? right? Like it's just the fact of the matter is like we act like the Mets are the only team that are going to be after Alcantara, and we're just going to get them. And oh, by the way, they're in our division. So, it's probably going to cost us a little bit more. So the same people that don't want to trade Luis Angel Acuna for, let's say, a Garrett Crochet or a Dylan Cease or any other pitcher that's, I'm not saying they're better than Sandy Alcantara, but this is what you're going to have to give up. Like, we're not the only teams going after him. It's going to be multiple teams. So the prices are going to be just as, probably as high at the deadline, and probably less now, but the Marlins aren't going to, get much value from him right now because of the injury concern at the moment. The price is going to be extremely high. And again, I haven't seen Stearns pull the trigger yet. And Alcantara would be the perfect guy to do so. He's under contract until 2026. He has a club option. I don't know if that's the club option stays put. If he gets traded, it might just become a player option. At that point, I don't have all the details here, but it's a club option right now for 2027. So you basically have him for, say, 2.5 years, including half of this year, if you get him at the deadline. But we just assume that this is going to happen. Like, I see the chat right now. Oh, who's been talking about Sandy Alcantara? Yeah, a lot of people have. But here's the problem. You weren't willing to give any prospects or a good package back for any of the pitchers we have mentioned throughout the offseason. And you're willing to give it for Sandy Alcantara. I'm on board with you. But haven't you learned anything from David Stearns? He's not pulling the trigger at the moment. And I think he's scared to do it. What if Luis Angel Acuna is going to be on this roster and he's playing well? Are you willing to trade him now? You're probably not. Like, that's the issue that we're talking about here, right? The guys that we're willing to, or at least I'm willing to trade because of the internal options that they're force feeding us right now. What if these guys are crucial to our team? Let's say if Beatty and Acuna make the team somehow, however that works out roster-wise. What if they really help the team? Are the Mets just going to say, well, they're helping the team, but we can get Sandy Alcantara, so we can afford to lose them? No. Like that's the thing that I just don't understand. Like, they put themselves in a situation where they might need those guys internally, but at the same time, who do you think the Marlins are going to be asking for? They're going to be asking for the Luis Angel Acuna's. They're going to be asking possibly, I mean, how many years did the Marlins ask for Brett Beatty? They still might like him, right? I know people said, let's just throw him away. But if you don't have Jose Iglesias, Magical is not going to be available. Your internal options are going to be what teams want, or at least what the Marlins would want. So, you put yourself in a rock and a hard place here. Everybody wants Sandy Alcantara Jr. There is no doubt. I don't give a shit about the prospects. I've said it many times already, right? Are you trying to win, or are you trying to, act like you want to win and then bitch and moan when you're not winning, but you're not willing to go above and beyond to do what it takes to win? That's the problem. They have not done that yet. I'm sorry to say they have not. Stearns has not done it. He's only been here a year and a half. I'm not going to kill him, but he's shown hesitancy since he's become president of baseball ops, right? I get why he didn't do it last year, but, maybe if he would have got that top of the rotation starter, maybe he would have been different in the NLCS. Maybe not, but we will never know because he never did it. Right now, there was a tremendous amount of options in the free agent market and the trade market. He pulled the trigger on none of them that can help this rotation. So to think that Sandy Alcantara is just going to, be the apple of Stearns' eye when he's still not willing to trade top prospects, I find that very hard to believe. I truly do.
Yeah, we'll see. Again, this is something that you and I have debated back and forth, and this debate will go on probably until the deadline when David Stearns, it's time to make the decision. But I just still think it's just too much of a logjam of prospects coming up in certain positions for David Stearns not to be already thinking forward in that manner. I don't know. I don't know. We'll see. Come July or whenever the trade deadline is, August 1st, whenever it officially is this year, I got to look it up. We will be on this discussion. And at this point, I know that you're pulling for me to be right as well, Rob, because I know you want to see this team succeed. But we'll see. I understand why the Mets aren't doing it right now per se. Actually, again, Crochet, I know you like to talk about Crochet. I think Crochet was a completely different story. I do, because I don't think that they were ever outbidding the Red Sox, personally speaking, right? And Corbin Burns, we could talk about Corbin Burns. He clearly identified Arizona as the destination that he wanted to go to. There were a handful of other free agents that we were talking about. I was talking about Max Fried all off season. He signed 7 years. We both didn't want to give him 7 years, right? So that's what it would have taken. There's situations that played out in a manner which is out of the Mets' control, where there were clear prices and price tags via trade or free agency that both of us set in terms of what's acceptable versus what's not. And I think that it played out in the correct manner. But to question the upcoming willingness of David Stearns that you're doing, I think it's completely valid. I will stand by my take and state that he will go and get a starter at the trade deadline if they need it. I think we can both assume that they will need it, right? I think he'll do it, but we'll see. This is going to be a fun conversation to go back and forth with all season long.
Yeah, it shows hesitancy in both areas. You're not willing to spend the money. You're not willing to trade prospects. So you're going to get low on the totem pole, besides Sean Manaea, which is, I mean, me and you could have got this deal done with Sean Manaea. Anybody in the chat could have got that deal done with Sean Manaea. He wanted to come back. Everybody else was Stearns looking to go bargain basement shopping. That's exactly what it was. Like, if you don't think it wasn't, that's what it was. Pay little and hope for the best. That's what he's going for here. And then not only did he do that, he's hurting our depth because he brought in a guy like Frankie Montas who has been injured over the last couple of seasons, right? Tyler McGill, nobody wants him in the rotation, but the Mets are counting on his 6-man rotation for whatever stupid reason because of Kodai Senga, and now it's even hurting your depth because of that. I just find that there's too many different ways. Like, every team in baseball know the Mets are so desperate for starting pitching. Like, Alcantara's not just walking to Queens, and we're getting them for basically nothing. The price is going to be high regardless of any pitcher that anybody wants to talk about, because of the competition. I just feel the situation is Stearns put themselves in a situation where you're not willing to spend the money, you're not willing to trade the prospects when you got 47 shortstops on the roster in your farm system. At some point, you got to do it. Now, prove me wrong. Please prove me wrong, right? Just because I just, at this point, I don't get it. Like, we have to wait until the trade deadline and hope this rotation works out for 3 months, maybe 4, before the deadline. I'd rather have Sandy Alcantara now for 30 starts than have him for 12 starts or 13 starts. I just don't understand the logic.
Well, the Marlins already said that they're not going to trade him until at least. Yeah, I get the principle. I understand the principle. So again, I understand for you, before we talk about the rest of this game and not go down this rabbit hole of the rotation, because I do want to get to a couple of different points here. I guess my last question for you on the rotation is, we go into the season with what we got. Blackburn, Clay Holmes, who we'll talk about here in just a second as we recap on the next slide, the game that we saw yesterday, which is very impressive, by the way. Senga, hopefully coming back to form, his 2023 version. Again, like, there's question marks, and I'm never going to go against you on that because there are clear question marks in terms of this rotation going forward. Let's say we get to a point in the season, we have to evaluate this rotation as fans, just like David Stearns has to do so as the president of baseball operations. For you, what would be an acceptable outlook of this rotation in terms of production in the first half of the season? Like, perfect world scenario, clearly they play to the back of their baseball cards and injuries do not happen. That's perfect world scenario. But, like, what would satisfy you, if anything, about this rotation in the first half?
Survive. It's going to be the same way. It's going to be the same thing like the rotation last year, right? We like the Luis Severino signing, right? We understand the Manaea, right? This was an evaluation mode, so nobody actually gave a damn about the rotation. Nobody cared because everybody thought they were going to win 70 games, right? Now that there's expectations, there is more question marks now in the rotation than it was last year because now we are competitors. We are contenders. It's a whole different story when you are not. You're hunted. You were hunting last year. Now you are the hunted. People know who you are. You have Juan Soto. People are coming. The Phillies want revenge. The Braves want revenge. Like, we all forget about that stuff as well, that we actually beat these teams to get into the playoffs. And I think it's survival mode. I really think it is. Not only I don't think this rotation is very good, you're already jumping into your depth and you didn't even start the season yet. And you're not willing to get Jose Quintana, according to the reports, right? You're not looking to trade for anybody at this point, pitcher-wise, that can actually help you. And I'm not talking about another Paul Blackburn type, So I think it's survival mode. I think they're really hoping that this offense can carry them, because again, the Mets didn't really start taking off until the offense came alive last year, right? The pitching kept us afloat last year, even though it was 11 games under 500, well away from a playoff spot. What's changed? The lineup is better, absolutely, right? The bullpen is better. But if you're going to be so scared of throwing innings with these guys and going to a 6-man rotation because you're so worried about Kodai Senga's innings and keeping him healthy and everybody else with the 6-man rotation, you're going to go into this bullpen a hell of a lot in the first half, which I think is going to hurt in the second half, which it always seems to do when you overuse your bullpen. They're going to overuse their bullpen because who's going deep in these games? Maybe Shomania. So I think survival mode is going to be for this rotation. And not saying they can't be good. I'm just saying I think you're in survival mode when it comes to this rotation, and they're relying on the lineup a hell of a lot. And they better come up to a quick start, this lineup, because if not, I don't think the rotation is gonna help this team and push them over the top, especially in the first half until we get to the trade deadline.
And just moving on here in terms of the actual game and what we saw, clearly we talked about Acuna, Vientos, Beatty, Siri a little bit as well. Siri taking the over, et cetera. We talked about him and Tyrone Taylor and that split distribution this upcoming season. Jared Young, a guy that I talked about, getting the actual start at first base, which was interesting. He's a utility player, can play corner outfield, second base, and now he's getting first base reps as well. He was another guy that I was looking out for in terms of being potentially a fringe roster addition, just like Nick Madrigal. If they wanted to get Luis Angel Acuna those everyday reps to start the season off in AAA, Jared Young would have been a nice fill-in there as a middle infield option, primarily second base, because I don't think he can play shortstop. But Alex Ramirez, longtime prospect. I know we were both huge on Alex Ramirez, especially last season, trying to have a bounce-back season. He really didn't. He takes the 0-for-3. Nick Morabito. Nick Morabito is interesting. He is just a speedy guy, man. He killed it last year in both A-ball. He posted nearly a 400 batting average at 397 in A-ball. The numbers dipped a little bit in high A-ball as well, 294, I believe, with a 730 OPS, somewhere around there. But again, infield single, he does this little toe tap, and the power that you're going to get out of Nick Morabito is not great, right? You can tell with the toe tap, he kind of limits himself in terms of the power that he can produce. But again, he put a ball on the ground, up the middle, just beyond, it wasn't within the reach of the shortstop, but he beat it out pretty easily. And then he went and proceeded to steal second base. Oh, by the way, he had 59 stolen bases collectively in his 2024 campaign. This is a guy that finished number 18 in the Mets farm system rankings after 2024. I think he's going to be moving up into at least top 15 when the 2025 MLB.com's top 15, 20, prospects come out in their list. I liked what I saw from Nick Morabito. Clearly, it's second day of spring training action, right? We got a lot more things to analyze, with the guys that are doing well, with the guys that are not doing so well. Luis Angel Acuna took the 0-for-3. I think he put a good swing on a baseball in the first at bat. So for me, again, it's a tie ball game right here after the ninth inning. There's no extras. The end score doesn't really matter. We're looking out for the tools. These guys are competing for fringe roster spots, but we're also making sure that, these guys are getting the reps that they need, especially against some pretty hefty competition, as going out the first time in the first inning in Sandy Alcantara. So what else, before we move on to what we saw yesterday, in that game where Clay Holmes started, what else did you want to talk about here in terms of the rest of this game?
Yeah, just with Nick Morabito, really quick, analytics hate this guy. It's just a fact. Like he is not the player that teams love ever, because he doesn't hit for power. I thought he was exciting, right? He's a hard-nosed player, right? He gets dirty, and he's a Jeff McNeil type. When Jeff McNeil was coming up, that's basically what he is, with a hell of a lot more speed, right? But because he has no power, he's just gonna go into oblivion in this Mets farm system. To be quite honest with you, teams, he might roll up a little bit in the farm system just because he's played well, but he's not the type of guy that he's not going to be the first guy called up or the second guy called up if they really need somebody in a few years. I just don't see that. I think he's gonna go into oblivion in this farm system because of just the stats that teams look at now. They don't really like in that situation, and power is one of them. Speed's nice and all, but this is the type of guy I'd love to see. He's the last man on the bench. Get him up in a pinch run spot. It's perfect, but I don't like, teams don't really like that type of player anymore, unfortunately. But it's just fun to see because he is working his way up the farm system, and he's one of those guys that's a hard-nosed player. But I don't think he's going to see the pros anytime soon. Everything else, I like what Mark Vientos did today. Just going with our regular roster, right? Hit the ball the other way, and that was against Alcantara. That was nice to see. Again, we talked a little bit about Brett Beatty. I don't care what Brett Beatty does in spring training. I don't. He hits minor league pitching. That's what he does, right? Until he does it at the pro level. Again, wake me up when he does that. That's why I don't trust him, and I don't want him on this roster because you need to get at bats with pro pitchers in games in the regular season. And if you're trying to win, I don't have no confidence in Brett Beatty going up there and doing it. So, good for him going 2 for 3, but it doesn't excite me at all. Jose Siri, I mean, he's frustrating at the plate, man. He swings at everything. Like, he doesn't look for pitch. He swings every pitch. He's trying to hit one over the wall. And that's the guy we thought we were getting. Like, we know that, but he will be frustrating to Met fans.
Yeah.
Like, the fans are going to want to get rid of him very quickly because that's all he does is swing and miss. And when he connects, he'll hit the ball over the wall, but he doesn't hit the ball enough for probably a lot of people to, want to keep him around. Anywhere else, I'm very excited about Max Kranick. I know we talked about it in our season preview last year. We thought he could have possibly made the team before he got hurt in the bullpen last year. I would not be shocked if Max Kranick has a good spring, and he might be one of the options in this rotation. I think he's going to outperform Tyler McGill, and I don't know if that's going to make Stearns put Max Kranick in this rotation. But Max Kranick got some good stuff. I think he can be better than Tyler McGill. He definitely could be better than Griffin Cannon. I go that route, to be quite honest with you. You brought him in last year. He got hurt. Watch out for Max Kranick. I think he's going to open up some eyes this spring and win a starting role in this rotation.
Yeah, I mean, even at the very minimum, like let's say if he doesn't, win that starting spot, he's going to be one of the first names called, from Syracuse if he starts his season off in AAA as that depth. And I agree with you. He did give up 3 hits in the 2 innings pitched. The command looked little shaky, but again, all in all, 2 innings pitched, no earned runs given up. He worked out of some jams. You got to like the situational game that he displayed, and the stuff as well is there, as we talked about last season before he went down with that injury, because you're right. We were talking about him either cracking the roster last year come opening day, maybe as a fringe rotation guy in the back end, or, as a bullpen piece. So that is the games that we saw today. I wanted to talk about, before we end this stream, just briefly what we saw yesterday, because I did the pregame yesterday. I posted this graphic. I'll be posting these graphics, more often than not, as my schedule allows, in the community tab of my channel. For you all that actually missed the game and want to get a synopsis of the win, loss, player of the game, etc., and the final score, this is what we had. Rob, did you watch this game yesterday?
Yeah, I did.
Clay Holmes looked good. I know it's spring training game 1. I understand that, but he went out there, 3 perfect frames, right? 2 and 3. The location and the movement looked spectacular. Clearly, he's a reliever going into the starting rotation. He was working full-time out of the stretch, I believe. That's what he could do. Oh, and by the way, Juan Soto, first at bat as a Met, no problem. Field home run. What did you like about yesterday's game? And at the very minimum, Clay Holmes, we've been talking about this transition where we've been seeing this movement of relievers go to the starting rotation slowly but surely. It's becoming a popular trend, and we've seen a lot of guys already have success around this league in doing so. What are your expectations And did this inspire any confidence out of you going forward for the full
Um,
162? I know it's early, but in terms of
yeah.
the process of it and how he looked.
Well, I think I was a little shocked that he went 3 innings, but that's again, I talked about this before with Clay Holmes. He's been putting in the work in the offseason because nobody goes out there for 3 innings and throws 34, 35 pitches in the first start in the spring, right? So he's been working hard to stretch out that arm, and it's clear in his first start in spring. That's a great sign, right? That changeup that he learned looks nasty. We know he has a heavy sinker. He has a curveball. He's using more of his arsenal than he used when he came out of the bullpen, right? I'm not saying he's going to win 15 games. He does have the stuff to be good. It's just that how sharp is this pitch is going to be when he's at the 75, 80 pitch mark in the fifth inning or sixth inning if he gets that far? You know, are they going to be flat fastballs? Are they going to be flat sinkers? Is that changeup not going to break? Is that curveball not going to break? His slider, is it not going to have enough break or a tight break that you see early on in the game? That's the concern that you have from a guy who's becoming a bullpen guy to a starting role. When he gets to that 75 to 85 to 90 pitch mark, can he be successful with his pitches? Is his stuff still there late into his start? That's what you have to worry about. And again, we're not going to know that for at least 3 more starts probably when he gets up to the 75, 85 pitch mark and he actually faces major league hitters because he faced all minor leaguers yesterday. So I don't care about the outcome, because his pitches were sharp, right? But everybody can look good in 1 inning or 2 innings or 3 innings. It's when you get to the fourth, fifth, or sixth, and you see the batting order the second, third time around, and is your pitchers as sharp? That's my only concern with Clay Holmes. The stuff is there, but can he still have that stuff later in the game during his starts? It's yet to be determined yet. We'll see when we get into the mid-March, when he's throwing that many pitches, when he's facing better hitters at the plate. We'll see. I think Clay Holmes is going to be fine. But again, define fine. He could be a good starter. Let's say he turns into Severino and he has a 4 ERA. That's good. But again, what this rotation needs is probably more at the moment. But again, I'm not gonna, cry wolf over here when you're throwing a reliever in there for the majority of his career. But I think Clay Holmes is gonna be fine. I just hope that his stuff is as good when he gets to that 75 plus pitch count.
Yeah, the longevity is always going to be an issue, right, in terms of what he can produce. I mean, clearly it's going to take some time to stretch him out into those later innings. We're going to see if the Mets decide to utilize an innings limit for him this season, being a starter for the first time since his rookie season in Pittsburgh. We'll see all of that. But again, mastering that kick change and getting that in tip-top shape is important. And it looked good so far. It's a new pitch that he's been trying to learn and develop, and it looks successful. Logan Webb actually is a heavy utilizer of that kick change. I think the broadcast was saying during the game. So I have high expectations for Clay Holmes. It's just about, again, right? Is he going to be a type of guy that can go finally deeper into the ball game for you? Maybe, maybe not. But at the end of the season, or like 3/4 of the way through this season, do we see an innings limit for Clay Holmes and transitioning him back to the bullpen? And maybe that's the idea anyways. Let's start him for the first half of the season, go out and get a starter via trade. I know you don't believe they're going to do it. I do think they're going to do it. And let's make that transition for Clay Holmes back to the bullpen for the second half. I don't know. I mean, we'll see. We'll wait and see. It's way too early to be putting labels on these players with that. But that's something that I will be monitoring at least until, as we progress through this season. Juan Soto, do you think that top 3 that we saw yesterday is going to be the top 3 come opening day?
So yeah, I was gonna message you and say, "Ooh, that looks pretty nice," but I think it's going to be the start again. Nobody's wrong here. Your lineup's not wrong. My lineup's not wrong. Wherever in the chat lineup is not wrong, right? You can go any combination in the top 4 as long as you have Lindor in the leadoff spot. You're going to be okay. Nobody's going to complain if the lineup is your lineup, my lineup, the person in the chat's lineup. Doesn't matter. But when I saw that, I'm like, yeah, Juan Soto's batting second. I just feel it, like, at least to start the season, right? See how it goes. I think the fact that they don't trust Pete Alonso yet, that lineup yesterday showed me they don't trust Pete Alonso yet. Put Alonso between Juan Soto and Vientos. I know Vientos didn't bat yesterday, but he put Alvarez in the cleanup spot. Vientos would be in that cleanup spot, in my opinion. I think it just works out that way. And they were saying it on the broadcast. I don't know what broadcast it was because I was trying to watch 2 games. But I think it was the SNY broadcast because Gary Cohen said they asked Mendoza if Vientos is batting second. Oh, sorry, Pete Alonso's batting second. He said absolutely not. Like he basically said that out loud. So I never thought that would make sense because all you're doing is hurting Lindor, to be quite honest with you, in my opinion, because I don't think Pete Alonso can protect anybody in this.
He sets up an easy double play too in the first inning if Lindor gets on. You know what I mean?
That's a good point. That's a better point than what I just gave, to be quite honest with you. I just think it makes more sense. I think when that confidence level gets higher for Pete Alonso, if it gets there, I think it will. Maybe they'll maneuver it around, but if your lineup is doing well, you're not going to change much in the top 4. I think protecting Pete Alonso for at least the first couple of weeks between Soto and Vientos, get him acclimated again. Don't put the ton of pressure on him in the beginning. I mean, it just shows that I don't think the confidence level is extremely high with confidence for Pete Alonso just yet. I think he'll be fine. Like, I think he will be good. It's just that when you got Juan Soto, when you have the confidence spilling out of Vientos, let those guys deal with the pressure for at least the first month and let Alonso just do his thing. And I think that's putting him cleanup just puts a ton of pressure on Pete Alonso right away. And I don't think they want to do that.
2 things I'm going to say. Pete Alonso actually looked good in terms of his plate discipline yesterday. I think he also got called out on strikes. And how do you like this new system, this new replay system, challenging balls and strikes?
Look,
It doesn't take that long, to be fair, to challenge it.
But here's the problem, right? We're taking all the anticipation and the excitement out of going to games, right? When you get a strikeout, fans go crazy. Yeah, let's go. We're out of the inning. Oh, wait, hold on. Right. Here comes the replay. Here it comes. I don't want to deal with that nonsense, right? If you're gonna do it for every pitch and have the earpiece with the ump telling them balls or strikes, and they call the ball a strike. If you're gonna get it, if you're doing a system to get the pitches right, not for 2 or 3 pitches in a game. Like, it's just stupid to me. Do it for all of them or do it for none of them, right? It's going to take the anticipation. Same thing with replay, right? I mean, we kind of got used to it because it's not so glaring, but when there's a guy gets thrown out and it ends an inning, you have to wait for a replay, and everybody's just sitting around eating their hot dog hoping for the call that we were supposedly going to get. I don't like it at all, to be quite honest with you. I think it's just a waste of time. It's quick. It's fine. But again, it's silly to me, quite honestly. Keep that shit in the minors. That's what it's there for.
Are they okay? Forgive me, because I honestly didn't even know that they're going to be doing it in spring training. Are they thinking about, like, are they doing this officially in the season?
No, they're not. It's supposed to be. They want to do it for 2026, but I was listening to a quote from Manfred. I think it was on MLB Network Radio. MLB or whatever the hell it was, one of the stations he was on, he said that this is not 100% perfect. That's why they're still trying to get the kinks out, whatever that means.
Sure.
Like, is it 100% accurate? If it is, it probably would have been here already. So, anything that they implement has to be agreed upon with the CBA, with the Players Union and Major League Baseball. So if it's not 100% accurate, I don't think it's going to get implemented in Major League Baseball. So.
My last question is that, because again, I'm not familiar with this system at all. I don't really watch too much minor league baseball to be familiar with that. I'm going to be completely honest. If you challenge and are successful, do you keep your challenge or you just get 2 in the game period?
You get to keep it. But again, I don't like the challenge rule with that. I think it's stupid. Like, the whole point of the system is to get the pitches right, ball or strike, not to have a guess. Like, this is the same thing with certain challenges, right? I think replay should happen every single time. I think they should be instant people watching every game in Major League Baseball offices. And if the call is wrong, tell the umpire right away. They have the video. You don't have to go to replay and have the umpire's fat asses running down to get the earphones and everything like that. Just give them the call. Like, the issue is, it's a challenge for these for this strike, this new technology. Like, why? Like, if you lose your challenges, so if you lose them in the 4th inning and you used all your challenges because you got 2 calls wrong already, there might be a call in the 8th inning that is probably a terrible call, but you can't use the challenge. It's so stupid. Like, just use it and put the headphones in the ears of the umpires and let the computer call balls or strikes for them, and they make the signal, strike or ball. That's it.
And at that point, like, why would they need umpires at all to begin with?
I mean, it's technology. We know firsthand technology fucks up in the worst times. So, what happens if the system breaks down? What are you going to have the umpires come down from the stands and be like, hey, let's go, strike 3, it's kind of silly. Like, you're taking all the human element out of the game. And it's like, I know you understand you're trying to get it right, but they're not trying to get it right for every pitch. It's just a system at the moment that's a challenge system, which is silly.
I'm going to say that I don't mind it on that kind of basis. I don't mind it at all, especially if it only takes that long or that short of time to correct. The biggest gripe that I will have with baseball in general, and you can call me old school in this if you want to, it's fine. And I know that this makes the game go faster. I understand that. I don't care about the replay system. That's fine. Keep it for all I care. The runner on second base in extra innings needs to go, man. I cannot do that anymore. It's just too much. It's like,
it is.
It's bad. It's bad. Anyways, I know that's kind of like an old school sort of take, but that is the one thing that just bothers me with all these rule changes, etc. Everything else, not so much, to be honest with you. The replay system, especially balls and strikes, I don't care. That's fine for me. But the runner on second base is just I have not gotten used to that at all. One thing that I was going to mention before we sign off here, as we're approaching, an hour and 10 minutes on this post-game stream, is that the situation with Soto batting second, this is the perfect way that it played out, right? Because this is why I never wanted Juan Soto to bat second. Because I know the end result's a home run. I understand that, right? I was watching it. I went bananas when, he hit that. I went crazy running around the room. In a regular season game, if Francisco Lindor gets out to lead off the game, and I understand this is just the first inning because things can play out in a weird way when the batting order comes up the second time around. There's no chance that an opposing pitcher is giving him any strikes in that at bat. They would rather put him on, and they would rather see Pete Alonso walk up and potentially hit into a double play. 1, 2, 3, boom, they're out of the inning. I don't think he's getting any strikes in that situation in the first inning if Francisco Lindor gets out. I don't think so.
That's a possibility, but then again, why have Pete Alonso at all? If you're batting him fourth, wouldn't they walk around Vientos to get to Pete Alonso fourth anyway? Like, you can talk about any concept, because like I would be more afraid of Vientos than Pete Alonso, because Vientos I think has a little bit more better understanding of the strike zone, where I think that he would lay off more pitches. I think they would try to get to Pete Alonso just like they did last year. Like, they pitched around anybody who was batting in front of Pete Alonso just to get to Pete Alonso. Like, I think they would do that anyway, regardless of who's in front of Pete Alonso. Like, I get your point. It's not a bad point at all. Like, I get your logic in it, but I think they would do that to anybody who was batting in front of Pete Alonso.
I don't know, man, because teams don't like to mess around with the runner on second base, man. I mean, it doesn't matter who's coming up, and that's why I would put Vientos third to begin with. If you're really committed to, having Soto second, there's part of me that wants Pete Alonso to bat behind Soto, but the other part of me is just like, that is not the most efficient way, especially if Lindor gets out and Juan Soto comes up. And if he walks, we all know Juan Soto's not stealing any bases, right? I mean, he's not any sort of speed demon or anything like that. He's not stealing any bases. We could largely assume. So he's going to be on first base. Perfect double play candidate is Pete Alonso. That's why I'm kind of leaning more towards him batting fourth to begin with. And let's just not act like Mark Vientos isn't a double play candidate himself, because he also doesn't have any sort of speed. If he hits the ball on the ground, it's almost a certainty that it's a double play. But I trust him not putting the baseball on the ground more than I do with Pete Alonso at this very moment. So I just wanted to ask what your opinion of that was, because I genuinely think, especially with the way that the Mets were pitching Juan Soto last season in the Subway Series, the opposing teams, if Francisco Lindor gets out in that first inning, he's not getting the opportunity to hit a solo home run unless a pitcher just absolutely misses wildly in the strike zone. he's getting put on base.
Well,
I'm just going to say that.
I think Juan Soto is so good at the plate that he kind of messes with the heads of pitchers. Like he gets his pitches regardless most of the time, and it's not like this is the only time that he has somebody behind him that somebody doesn't want to go to. He's had the Padres, he had with the Nationals, where they probably didn't want to pitch to him to get to somebody else that probably is not as good, and he still found a way to do some damage. I feel like this: if you're not willing to give Pete Alonso the opportunity, right? The whole point was getting Pete Alonso back because everybody thinks he's going to have a better year. If you're already afraid to put him in a spot where he can cause, do damage, like, why have him at all? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I just feel like, you're going to bat him fourth. They're going to do the same thing to Vientos. So would you rather see Vientos having more fastballs or Pete Alonso having more fastballs? Because in my opinion, I have more confidence in Vientos getting more fastballs and getting ready to go. Because again, you think they want to pitch around. Here's the reason why that I like Pete Alonso batting third, right? The Juan Soto thing, you could be right about that. Right. But the Peter Alonso situation, I think pitchers are more afraid of Mark Vientos because he's not just a power guy. This is a guy that would run a double in the right center field gap to drive in some runs. I don't think that you're going to see more fastballs with Pete Alonso third because I think they're afraid of Vientos, in my opinion. And I think it's going to help. Now, I do agree with you. If the confidence level for Alonso gets there and he looks like old Pete Alonso, we can have that conversation right away. Switching it over to Pete Alonso batting second with Juan Soto, batting third. But I still think the concept's the same. Lindor can get on and Pete Alonso can hit into a double play anyway, and then you have Juan Soto coming up with nobody on. So, that's always a possibility. You can look at it any way, but I think in any spot you put Pete Alonso second, third, or fourth, I think they're looking to get him out and in any scenario. And I think that, could Pete Alonso see more fastballs with Juan Soto behind him and Vientos? I think it's kind of the same concept at that point. It's not like Juan Soto is going to change his approach because Pete Alonso is batting in front of him. So
I'm not proposing Pete Alonso batting in front of him. I'm not going to propose that. I'd rather just do at that point either Vientos second or Nimmo second. Anybody to get on base. Anybody to get on base with Juan Soto coming up at least in the first inning. That's the only thing that I'm trying to open up in this discussion.
Let's say if you're going to have Juan Soto bat, what you said third, right, and then Pete Alonso fourth. That was what you were talking about.
Yeah.
Okay. Like, Juan Soto's not going to change his approach no matter where he bats in the lineup, right? Because he's just that type of player. Right?
I agree.
I still think they're trying to get to Pete Alonso, like in the fourth spot, the third spot, the second spot. I think they're trying to, because I think it's more of a threat of a double play in the top four. Everybody's looking at Pete Alonso for that. I know Vientos is slow as molasses, but I still trust Vientos getting the job done and driving the ball. I still don't. The confidence level is as much as I did want Pete Alonso coming back because he solidified this lineup with Juan Soto. The confidence level is still not there, right? I think he's going to be okay, but I'm not trusting Pete Alonso to be the cleanup hitter when the 95% of Met fans said that he's never gotten protection, and now we're putting him in a spot where he has no protection. The whole point of getting Juan Soto and the emergence of Vientos is now that you have protection for Pete Alonso, don't waste your time putting Pete Alonso behind all the guys that can protect him. It kind of doesn't make sense. Nimmo's not protecting anybody. I'm sorry to say. He's not. Right? They tried that. They've been there, done that with them. It just doesn't work. Right? So I feel like put Pete Alonso third. If the confidence level is there for Pete Alonso and he gets it done, we can have a totally different conversation. But if the lineup's doing well, you're not going to make that many changes. But again, I don't think any of us are wrong, by the way. I will not fight if the lineup tomorrow or opening day is what you said, Chris. I'm going to be like, okay, right? I don't agree with it, right? And trust me, you would rather be wrong. I would rather be wrong in disagreements just so we can win games, right? We said that for how many times we've been on shows. We want to be wrong in our disagreement of the lineup just because we want to win. It's just a matter of, I don't think the trust level is there for Pete Alonso yet. And Mendoza watched him every single day continuing to slip up last year. And until he actually does it, I think that's exactly why you saw Pete Alonso in a 3 spot, because Vientos is probably going to be batting fourth. And I think the Lindor Soto 1-2, I just think that's a sweet spot for Mendoza. I think he loves that situation because worst case scenario, both of those guys get on in front of Pete Alonso, and the scenario that every Met fan wants, oh my God, look, Pete Alonso has a chance right away. I think that's the whole idea, to be quite
You can
honest.
have, then that's what I'm saying. That's why Pete Alonso should bat fourth in my mind, because you'll have that scenario. If you're telling me that, if your argument is that people want to get to Pete Alonso regardless, and they'll also not only pitch around Juan Soto and Mark Vientos at that point, you're going to have first and second regardless of whether he's batting third or fourth. You know what I mean? Any situation in which Pete Alonso comes up with first and second,
Yeah, but don't you think he's going to see less fastballs?
if we paid him in a walk here, any situation that comes up with him in first and second base, he needs to get the runners on, or he needs to get the runners in. And at this point, if the Mets paid him, they paid him to do that. They paid him to do that. So I am going to have confidence in him, and this is where you and I differ. I will have confidence in him until he proves to me that he can't do it. He didn't do it in 2024, but he got brought back here for a reason. If the Mets think that he was going to revert back to the old ways, why would they even bring him back? You know what I mean? They would have wasted
Well, they
$25,
put him
$30
back
million.
because there was no other option. I'm sorry to say, but they put themselves between a rock and a hard place. They had to bring back Pete Alonso when there was no other option. We even talked about that.
Well, so he's good for something then. I mean, at least he's good for something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Look, they're not saying, oh my God, let's just get Pete Alonso because it's the worst thing in the world and it's the only option we have. Obviously, he's going to help. Like, I mean, if he doesn't, then we're in for a really bad conversations about Pete Alonso. I think he's going to be fine, but I think the lineup that we saw, I think they're going to roll that out there in the beginning, only because of the fact that they trust Lindor, they trust Juan Soto, and I truly believe Mendoza really trusts Mark Vientos, because again, when you have 15 RBIs, 5 home runs in the postseason, and he didn't even like flinch in big spots. Like, I'm not saying Pete Alonso played well in the postseason, right? He did. But
yeah.
when you have the trust of those guys, and Pete Alonso, besides the playoffs, right, for the majority of the year, kind of disappointed you a lot. I think until he shows that he is Pete Alonso, because we know it's in there, we believe it's in there, right? Until he completely falls off the face of the earth, which he didn't fall off the face of the earth last year. He just had a down Pete Alonso season. If he shows any signs of what we loved about Pete Alonso, going to the opposite field, driving the ball to right center, not swinging at that stupid slider 12 feet off the plate, and have a better understanding and better eyes at the plate, I think we can talk about every lineup that we both are talking about. You're talking about, because I'd be okay with that. It's just that I don't think that they trust him to be the cleanup hitter. And having the bases loaded with Pete Alonso. Now you could have, Nick Madrigal with the bases loaded. I think we all want Pete Alonso over him. But I still don't think, I'm not confident with the bases loaded with Pete Alonso up and thinking that he's not going to hand to a double play or strike out. I still have that dented in my freaking mind. Unfortunately, I do. Right?
Any situation in the first inning that Pete Alonso comes up with, I mean, if the first two batters get out, then it's a different situation. But any other situation, he's always going to be a double play candidate. It's just, if you bat in the court,
because it is slow speed, like.
But I'm just saying, like, any situation, if there's any runner that gets on, whether he's batting 3 or 4, there's always a potential for a double play with Pete Alonso.
Oh, sure.
So,
yeah, I mean, he's going to come up many times with situations where he might hit into a double play. But, even if he bats third or fourth, it kind of almost doesn't matter. Somebody could be hot. Like, Soto could be cold, Vientos might be hot, and you still have a guy that's going to run into a double play or possibility of a double play. Again, we're not wrong. None of us are wrong here. It's just a matter of, preference at this point. But again, we'll know right away, right? I think if once we get a little bit later into spring and they start throwing out the lineups you might see on opening day, I think we'll have a better understanding of it.
Someone show me where Juan Soto said this. Someone show me where Juan Soto said this, that he explicitly said that he was uncomfortable batting third. Because guess what? He did it for the majority of his Nationals career, and he has fantastic numbers and produced fantastic output. So there's no chance that he said this. Unless I'm completely off base, which I don't think I am. If someone can actually prove this to me, send it to my DM, send the link in the chat, whatever you want to do. I don't think he ever said this.
I don't
So
remember him ever saying that, but there was something last year with the Yankees where they thought about batting Judge in front of him and him batting third, and whatever reason they put him in front of Judge batting second. I don't know if that was a Juan Soto conversation and it was reported like that or what, but I remember if you go back and because we're nuts and we kind of look at craziness. Go back to spring training with the Yankees, right? Judge was batting in front of Juan Soto for a couple of games. And I think that's what they wanted to do. For whatever reason, they changed it when the season started. Maybe Juan Soto did say something about that. I didn't hear that unless I wasn't paying attention enough. But I always felt like Juan Soto is a number two hitter. Like I just based on his on base percentage, where I think his career on base is like 400. I think if I'm not mistaken. And again, the guy can hit 30 plus home runs, with his eyes closed and bat 275, 280 and knocking 90 to 100 RBIs. Like that's the player he is.
well, the quote that I see from Carlos Mendoza, whether on this very conversation or whether he wants to bat two or three, he's willing to do whatever.
Oh
So
yeah.
I don't think that he ever
Well,
said he's
I
uncomfortable
mean, you
in
give
any
somebody
situation.
15 years and $800 million, you better do whatever. Like, what? Shut up. Like, I'm sorry, Juan. I love you. I'm glad you're a Met, but you do what you're told. You're getting paid a lot of money for your manager and Stearns and Cohen. I mean, if they say that sit in right field and sit on top of your head, you're gonna do it. Like, so like, and I do like what Juan Soto said. He's trying to be a Gold Glover. I don't think he ever will be. But him talking about that and saying that, I have a batting title, I want a gold glove. That's nice to hear a superstar say, because he could have just been that cocky superstar that says, I'm great. I am what I am. He didn't say that. And I like to hear that.
No, I don't think that's yeah, that does not give off like Juan Soto vibes. It seems like he's very, very humble
He's humble.
regardless of the contract. You love to see that. And again, we've seen a lot of or we've seen particularly one player in Javier Baez that had his one weakness was just chasing egregious pitches out of the zone. And the Mets somehow, in his stint with the Mets, got him to stop chasing. And then he goes to the Tigers and automatically starts chasing again. I'm wondering if the Mets can do that with a guy like Jose Siri, as we talked about previously in our conversation. That'd be fantastic if they could find that out. But also, right? I mean, like when Pete Alonso was coming up, everybody was like, "This guy's terrible defensively." He explicitly also stated that he wants to win the Gold Glove. We haven't seen it clearly, right? And nothing that we've seen on field shows us that he's going to ever be one. But the fact that he continuously puts in those reps, he
Yeah.
works hard at his craft it means a lot. It shows a lot about the character and the work ethic for sure.
Yeah, Pete
100%.
Alonso has gotten better since when he came up in 2019. That's a fact, and that's from
Yeah,
hard work. And maybe Juan Soto will put in that work. I'm not saying he's going to be a Gold Glover, but if he comes a little bit above average, I think that would be great.
yeah. Final thoughts here as we close up this first post-game stream of the season, approaching an hour and a half. We appreciate everybody watching again. Just for me, before we close things out, and Rob gives his statement. Please do smash on that subscribe button on both channels. Hit the like button; it helps us out tremendously. Again, you'll be seeing us more often than not doing these post-game analysis type videos, and I can't wait until we actually get into the season because at that point, we've been talking about what if this happens, what if that happens. There's no more what ifs as soon as March 27th rolls around. There's no more excuses. It's win or loss. And that's how we'll be assessing, and we will be assessing, those post-game streams in this Mets season as such. So we definitely appreciate the support. Hopefully, this gives you a little bit of a feel of how we talk about this team. I'm holding out hope, man. I think there's a lot of good signs that we've seen early in spring training. There's a lot of good signs that we're going to continue to see in spring training. And I think that outside of maybe a couple of roster spots, this team is going to be what it is at the end of the day. We're still trying to figure out the last rotation spot, the last bullpen spot, the last bench spot, but everything else really at this point is pretty solidified. And I'm pretty happy on paper with what this team has produced. Clearly, we're going to be all eyes on the rotation to see how they actually hold up, especially in the first half of the season. But if you give me, a yes or no, if I'm satisfied with what we've seen so far this offseason, I'm going to say yes, 100%. So, Rob, final thoughts before we close things out.
Yeah, health is key. Like I think we cannot have another injury in the rotation, and we need health. right? They're going to baby these guys through spring training. They can't have another injury in the rotation. That's the biggest concern of mine. I think the lineup's going to be okay. I think the bullpen's going to be fine. I think there's going to be some surprises this spring that say, hey, maybe this guy can actually win a roster spot on opening day, and we'll see. But the good news is that it's baseball season. We're ready to go, right? Spring training is when we should complain a lot, where we don't like to see certain things. And like, oh my God, here we go with Tyler McGill again, or this guy or that guy. It's fun, right? We smell the fresh air. We smell the grass. We smell spring coming, warmer weather. That's what this is all about. And until things, start working out or not working out, that's when we'll have more to talk about. But 2 days into spring, we already have 2 injuries, and hopefully we don't have more. And we're talking about mostly a fully healthy roster going into opening day. But guys, post games are always going to be fun with us. We're holding on to our special backgrounds and little graphics and all that for the season, because we have a whole new setup for post game and pregame, by the way. But we have a lot of content. You're going to see our faces so much this year that you'll probably get sick of it, but we hope you don't. So thank you for watching, guys, and let's go Mets.
Yeah, let's go Mets. As it pertains to spring training post games, I mean, we'll talk amongst ourselves offline here to see what we can do. I think I might be available for one tomorrow, but we'll just talk in terms of how we're going to do that. And keep an eye out on this, right? I mean, post games are going to look a lot different in terms of the actual background come regular season. This is just kind of spring training, just gearing up, getting our feet wet before the real thing kicks off. And Rob's actually going to be doing the post game starting the season in Houston, so that's going to be huge news. So, all right, guys, this was the New York Mets post game show with both myself and Rob. We appreciate it. Let's go Mets. We're going to continue to watch and assess and analyze for you all everything that you need to know out of Mets spring training. As always, smash the thumbs up and subscribe buttons. Let's go Mets. Catch you all later. 1:05 p.m. tomorrow against the Cardinals, and Blade Tidwell, Mets top 10 prospect, on the mound to start the game. See you all then. Peace.